Earl Browder said this openly in a platform, the head of Communist Party USA, to a group of seminary students. He said, "You may be surprised to know that we have preachers who are active in churches, who are active members of Communist Party USA."
Hello, everyone. Rebecca Terrell with the New American Magazine. And joining me today is a very special guest. Dr. Paul Kengor is a professor of political science at Grove City College in Pennsylvania, and he serves as executive director of the conservative think tank Institute for Faith and Freedom. He's authored many books, including The Devil and Karl Marx, and now he is co-author with Dr. Mary Nicholas of a new book called The Devil and Bella Dodd. Dr. Kengor, thank you for taking time to speak with us today about what must be one of your proudest accomplishments.
Oh, well, yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate it. And Bella Dodd is really somebody that I learned about years ago. And my co-author, Mary Nicholas, I'd have to say it's one of her proudest accomplishments because she has spent decades following Bella Dodd. And I've done, I don't know, probably about 20 books. This is her first book. It's really a lifelong work for her. And it was really, her passion, her commitment to get this story into print. So it's good to have helped participate in getting that done.
And she did it so well. The book covers so many topics so masterfully. But I think one of the most important things to emphasize about it is it's not just a history book or a run-of-the-mill biography. Reading through it, I was continually struck by the thought that this is the red pill of red pill books. Everything that Bella Dodd and her cohorts in the Communist Party of the United States were working for back in the early to mid 20th century is coming to pass now right before our eyes. There's so many people who believe that the current chaos around us began with COVID, but I say it's more that COVID is one of the many symptoms of the spread of atheistic communism across the globe. But I think go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say you're probably going in this direction, so I don't want to throw you off course, but just very quickly, the two areas that Bella Dodd infiltrated the most were education, and the area that we really hit in our book, her role in infiltrating seminaries, Catholic seminaries in her case, but the party generally hit seminaries for all the mainline denominations. So education and churches. So yeah, right then and there, you could really see the ripple effect of that today in the 2020s from what they did 100 years ago, beginning in the 1920s and 1930s.
Right. Well, we know that the Michigan law enforcement raided the secret convention of the Communist Party of the United States in Michigan in 1922. And then they uncovered evidence that every area, not just in our government, but also in churches and schools and Hollywood, entertainment, everything was infiltrated back at that time. And that was now more than 100
years. That's what, certain people, it's attributed to Antonio Gramsci, different members of the Frankfurt School, what they call the conveyor belts of the culture. And in fact, the founders of the Frankfurt School, Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, they called it the culture industry. And if you go today to People's World, which is the flagship publication of Communist Party USA, so People's World replaced Daily Worker as the flagship publication. They have this call for what they call cultural workers. Yeah. So they're no longer going to the factory floor or coal mines or steel mills, right? I mean, those people are Trump supporting, MAGA hat wearing, gun toting. They think that those people are all Neanderthals, right? They call them all sorts of names, but they're looking for culture, especially academia, education, Hollywood, and again, these conveyor belts of culture.
Right, exactly. And I think that a lot of people think we say communism because that's what she was involved in. And a lot of people think of that as strictly a political and economic school of thought. But Bella likened it more closely to a religion and a false religion at that. Of course, it's obvious to readers of your book that you and Dr. Nicholas are Catholics, and Tan Books, the publisher of this book, is a Catholic publisher as well. But talk to me a little bit about why this is a book that is of interest not just to Catholics. This is interest to everyone.
Yeah, and I did a book prior to this called The Devil and Karl Marx, and that talked about Marx's atheism, Marx's fascination with the devil, and people who read that, Rebecca, said, the thing that struck me the most wasn't just what you said about Marx, and Marx being racist, anti-Semitic, all this other stuff that they knew nothing about. They said, if you really look at the book, the longest section is on the infiltration of churches, right? And I said, yeah, that's where they did their most damage, right? Not just the inheritors of Marx and Engels. And I had a chapter then on Bella Dodd. And so that eventually led to this, to the fuller book on Bella Dodd. But they went after the churches full force, 1920s into the 1930s. We quote Earl Browder at the start of the book speaking to students at Union Theological Seminary in December 1935, which is a very left-wing, religious left, kind of mainline Protestant seminary in New York. And he said, you might be surprised to know that we have preachers. This is Earl Browder said this openly in a platform, the head of Communist Party USA, to a group of seminary students. He said, you may be surprised to know that we have preachers who are active in churches, who are active members of Communist Party USA. Now that's astonishing because as William Z. Foster, his predecessor, said in congressional testimony, he said, look, you can't be a communist and a Christian. I mean, and Foster was asked, he said, well, I suppose somebody with religious scruples could maybe still come in and join the party, but it wouldn't make any sense. And they need to be in the process of liquidating those beliefs, right? So how could you have preachers who were active in churches who were Communist Party members unless they're plants?
Exactly.
Right? Unless they're infiltrators. So they had done that to the mainline denominations in particular, Presbyterian Church, what became Presbyterian Church USA. I'm a Catholic convert, so I was once in a PCUSA church. The United Methodist Church, the Episcopal Church, those were the big ones. Those were the big ones that they hit. And that's what I focused on at length in the Devil and Karl Marx, quoting congressional testimony of former communist Ben Gitlow, Manning Johnson, Herb Philbrick, Louis Boudin's, on and on and on, talking about this. But after they had hit those really hard, then they went after the Catholic Church. And that was the Bella Dodd story. At first, they tried what Earl Browder called the outstretched hand, which was like an olive branch to Catholics, where the communists were more open and said, well, we don't attack religion. I mean, that opiate of the masses stuff, that's all misquoting of Karl Marx, right? We agree with you on helping the poor, on social justice. You
right.
Catholic progressives, we're progressives just like you. And to be fair, there were some groups like even Dorothy Day's Catholic Worker. Dorothy Day was a very left-wing Catholic, right, who said on a front page editorial, no, you guys are atheists and materialists, and we're happy that you want to do this, but we cannot have common ground with you. You reject God, you are atheists. Yeah. And of course, her church at the Vatican was releasing encyclicals like Pius XI's Divini Redemptoris in 1937, saying not only can you not work with communists, but communism is a satanic scourge. Yes. Produced by the sons of darkness, it called it flat out demonic. Right. So the church just blasted this. And at that point, people like the party, and this is what we spend the most time in the book, Bella Dodd, in her own words, and we interviewed people who she told us to, including the late, great Alice von Hildebrand, who died about a year ago. She said she helped place over 1,000 communist men, unquote, or helped to recruit over 1,000 communist men into Catholic seminaries. So that was at the least what she helped intend to do. Now, the degree to which they succeeded, we don't know. But the mere fact that they tried to do that is striking enough. And one other thing, Rebecca, and I'm talking a lot, but this should not surprise anybody. when the reaction that I've had to this book by a number of people, priests and even conservative Catholics, they're incredulous. Right? No, the party wouldn't do this. Yeah, they would do it. They did it to all the denominations. Of course they would do it. Of course they would try. Now, whether they did it, whether it succeeded, that's another issue. But the fact that they would try to do it, oh yeah, they would try to do that. They did this with everything, including, as we show, especially with the teachers unions.
Right, absolutely. Well, I think you'd have to be either intentionally or maybe neglectfully ignorant of things like the St. Gallen Mafia, the Lavender Mafia. Those groups didn't just crop up unexpectedly. They were carefully planned.
Or liberation theology, right?
There you go. Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
No, I do. I've always been, I thought it was very interesting your handling of that particular quote about Bella Dodd helping personally recruit some 1,000 or 1,200, and you'll see different numbers attributed to her in that quote, and you'll see that quote directly attributed to her, which I personally still, even after reading your book, I still think that that's sloppy journalism. I think that it's a lot more appropriate to attribute that quote directly to Alice von Hildebrand. And you actually had two other eyewitnesses who'd signed affidavits saying they heard her describe her involvement in that. I do still think it's curious that she would, her main, as you've said, and as your book it so meticulously details, her main work was with labor and teachers unions. She was in the education arena. And so it is odd to me that she would say that she personally helped recruit those, even though then again, being involved in the education arena, she did have access to young people. So I can see that maybe, there was something like that. I've never used that quote, though. I've never attributed that quote directly to her because I've scanned everything she ever wrote. I'm a huge fan of Bella Dodd. I've read her congressional testimony to Senate as well as the House. I've tried to listen to every single speech that I could hear that was recorded and is on social media, YouTube, and things like that. Never once. It's not just that she hasn't said that particular quote. It's that I never heard her talk anything about religious organizations. However, she was in a position to know, even if she wasn't personally involved in infiltrating this. She held a very high position within the Communist Party. And the one thing that I think is so very special about your book, you have obtained her recently declassified FBI files. She was such an important figure that those files were classified for so long. Why were they classified for so long? And what did you find in those files that we didn't already know from her writings and her testimony?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, she died over 50 years ago, and her FBI file was still classified. So I started filing FOIA requests with the help of a friend, Bill Marshall. I think around 2019. I give the dates in the book. And we got, in the end, I think something like 1,281 pages of her FBI file released. And we found out, among other things, that Senate investigators for, I think, what would have been probably the McCarthy committee, called her the Falcon. they actually had a code name for her. But we were hoping to find in there something about the church infiltration, but we found nothing. And I was wondering, Rebecca, is that the reason for the classification? Is that what's holding this up? And even then, as we say in the book, if you go through, I should share some of this material with you. Maybe you could look into it. I could forward you some of the PDFs, in fact, given that you've spent so much time on her. There is so much on her that is in government archives that are just, it is like a labyrinth trying to go through. I mean, you could probably spend the rest of your life hounding the federal bureaucracy, just trying to get through all of this and figure out what she said. And to whom she said it. Now, she did, according to Alice von Hildebrand, who said, boy, we documented 4, 5, 6 times where Alice said this. In fact, Alice even said it to Michael Voris of Church Militant. You can watch it on YouTube.
Bella Dodd gave a talk in Orange, California, in which she declared publicly, I repeat, publicly, that in the course of the 20 years of activities for the communists, she recruited some 1,100 young men, neither faith nor moral. They entered seminaries. And they were so superbly trained that it was not that easy to detect them, because in many ways they seem to be orthodox. But then it's a big poison here and a big poison there. And as I said, spread doubt.
And she is certainly a dependable source.
Yeah, she's totally credible.
Right.
Yeah, she is. And I think one of the other more remarkable testimonies, we go through this in the book, is right after Bella Dodd is brought into the church on April 7th, 1952 in St. Patrick's Cathedral. 3 weeks later, April 27th, 1952, I think it is, on the front page of the New York Times, Fulton Sheen is in Rome. And the title of the headline in the New York Times is something like, Sheen in Rome talks of red infiltration of priesthood.
Yeah.
And Sheen says in that New York Times article, he's speaking at Santa Susanna Church, an American church in Rome. And he said a call went out in 1936 at a very large American city. I mean, it's obviously New York, right? Yeah, in order to infiltrate the priesthood. He's clearly getting that from Bella Dodd, who he had given instruction into the church over the previous 4 or 5 months.
Right.
Now, what's interesting is she never said anything again on that publicly. And according to Alice von Hildebrand and others, he told Bella Dodd that he didn't want her to talk about it and didn't want her to name names, which is
curious, because he was a real, he was a real tattletaler as far as communism.
Well, that's right. I mean, it's a great point. Think of all the things that Sheen said about communism. He probably blasted communism literally 1 million times, right? Yeah. And so why wouldn't Sheen talk about something that big? Well, given how much the church condemned communism, beginning with 1846 encyclicals like Qui Pluribus by Pius IX, 2 years before the Communist Manifesto was even published. Imagine in 30s, 40s, and 50s, the height of the Cold War. The Soviets are the enemy, right? And there's nothing, the church called communism demonic, satanic, evil, from the devil, from the pit of hell. So imagine if someone like Bella Dodd and Fulton Sheen came out and said, well, I got news for you.
Right.
They've infiltrated the priesthood. I mean, that would have been unbelievable. And imagine what the left would have done with this, right? The communists. Oh, Bishop Sheen, I didn't know you were Joe McCarthy, right? Exactly. You seeing a red under every bed? I bet there's reds under the pews, right? And the left would have all jumped in. They would have all ridiculed it. They would have all made fun of it. So Sheen took kind of the approach that Pope John Paul II took. I talk about this in my book, A Pope and a President, when he was told by President Bush's ambassador in 1989, 1990, that the United States knew that the Soviets were behind the attempted assassination of John Paul II. He said, I know, and I don't want you to talk about it because they'll deny it, and it's just going to cause more trouble, and everyone knows they did it. And here I would add, everyone ought to know that the communists would have tried to infiltrate the Catholic Church.
Sure.
That should be not a surprise to anybody. So the fact that they would have turned to someone like Bella Dodd, who was known as a master organizer and had placed over 1,000 communists out of 10,000 people in the New York State Teachers Union.
Right.
I mean, by the 60s in the United States, there were 60,000 priests. I mean, to place 1,000 priests would have probably seemed a cinch to her. She was penetrating all kinds of other unions. The longshoremen. She was involved in numerous front groups. So she would have at least heard of the idea and said, yes, comrade, let's give it a shot. How far she would have gotten, who knows?
Right. And it was already happening, we know, before that. We know that from the early 1900s when Pope Pius X was in the chair of Peter, and he implemented the oath against modernism that all seminarians had to take, because
the church is way out ahead on this. They saw it all coming. And the communists did this to the Russian Orthodox Church. They did it to all the churches behind the Iron Curtain. They hated religion. They were sneaky, nefarious, insidious, evil. And
I do think it's interesting, though, that is attributed to Fulton Sheen still, because it was just after that The Third Secret of Fatima was supposed to be released in 1960, and of course that was shoved under the rug too. So it's a very intriguing time, and I would love to get those PDFs from you to be able to review those.
Sure. Yeah, I'll send them to you as soon as we click off, and you can
absolutely. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I know your time is very short, I'm taking a lot of it, but
my phone just rang. Sorry, during these book tours like this, it's wall to wall.
Absolutely understandable. And what I want to do right here, though, before we close, I want to give you the chance to tell our viewers how they can learn more, how they can get in touch with you, and especially where they can purchase the book.
Yeah, thanks. So the book is available through Tan Books, and you could also get it at Amazon. So you could find it there. And I teach at Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania. And I'm also the editor of the American Spectator, and you could find my articles there at spectator.org.
Wonderful. Well, that is great. Thank you again so much for your time today, and Happy New Year, and God bless you.
Well, thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alan Keyes. I'm the host of IMTV's daily talk show about news and events in America. And I want to say a good word for the New American magazine. Not only because Alex Newman has joined us as somebody who is periodically hosting a show, but because New American Magazine represents a alternative media that is willing to tell people the truth. With so much fake news spreading about, and the fact that right now this country's in an existential crisis, we remember who we are and where we come from and what our principles are, or we die. Reading New American Magazine can keep you up to the minute on the issues that are challenging us as a people and on which that survival hangs. You can check it out and subscribe at www.thenewamerican.com.